"Ma'am, I need you to step aside," Karen Matthews says, blocking the entrance with a practiced smile. Dr. Aisha Caldwell blinks, gripping her first-class ticket tighter. "Excuse me? There's been a mix-up. This section is reserved." Karen's voice is firm, her eyes scanning Aisha with something unreadable. Passengers behind her shift impatiently. A man clears his throat. Aisha glances around, curious eyes, subtle stares. The weight of the moment presses against her chest. "This is my flight. This is my seat," Aisha states, steady but confused. Karen doesn't move. The tension thickens. "I'm sorry, but you can't board this flight." Aisha exhales, keeping her voice level. "There's no mix-up. My ticket, first class, seat 2A. She holds it up. Karen's smile tightens. "There must be an error in the system." Passengers murmur behind her. A man whispers, "That's first class, though." "What's the issue?" Another woman discreetly raises her phone, recording. Aisha glances at the screen behind Karen, first class boarding, now, before meeting her gaze again. "Would you stop a white man like this?" Karen stiffens. "I assure you this has nothing to do with—" Aisha cuts her off. "Then let me through." Karen hesitates, then her voice sharpens. "I need to verify something first." Karen folds her arms. "Unauthorized upgrades aren't allowed." Aisha frowns. "I never asked for an upgrade. I bought this seat." Karen's expression doesn't change. "Our policy requires additional verification for certain transactions." Aisha's stomach twists. "Certain transactions." The phrase hangs in the air, loaded. "Show me where it says that," she challenges. Karen doesn't budge. "Ma'am, I don't make the rules." A teenage boy nudges his mother. "She has a ticket," he whispers. The mother shushes him. Aisha's pulse pounds. The familiar frustration bubbles beneath her skin. "Not again, not here." "Then check your system. You'll see I belong here," she says, keeping her voice even. Karen exhales sharply. "Security." Aisha's heart stutters as a uniformed officer approaches. "Ma'am, we need to step aside and discuss this." Passengers shift uncomfortably. A man mutters, "This is ridiculous." Another woman, clutching a designer bag, averts her eyes. Aisha stands her ground. "Why? My ticket is valid." She extends it again, slow and deliberate. Karen doesn't even glance at it. "We have procedures." The officer sighs. "Let's not make this difficult." Aisha steadies herself. "I will not be treated like a trespasser when I did nothing wrong." A man in a business suit frowns. "Let her board." Karen ignores him. "Ma'am, if you refuse to cooperate, we'll have to remove you from this flight." Aisha's breath catches. Not again. The murmurs swell, shifting from quiet confusion to uneasy tension. "What's happening?" someone asks. "She has a ticket," another replies. "So what's the problem?" Aisha hears it all but keeps her eyes on Karen. A white man in line clears his throat but says nothing. A young black couple watches intently. Phones remain raised. Some passengers record, others pretend not to see. Karen taps her foot, impatient. Aisha meets her gaze, unwavering. She's waiting for me to shrink. But Aisha straightens her shoulders. "You're making a mistake." Karen sighs, reaching for Aisha's ID. "Fine, let's see." She stops mid-sentence. Her eyes flicker. A pause. "Doctor? Aisha Caldwell?" Recognition dawns like a slap. Aisha watches as Karen's confidence falters. The name clicks, maybe from the news, a published article, a conference. Karen swallows. "You're a doctor?" Aisha folds her arms. Would that have mattered 5 minutes ago? The tension shifts. Karen hesitates, lips parting like she wants to backpedal. Passengers lean in. The damage is already done. "Dr. Caldwell, your work is groundbreaking. How does it feel to be the first?" Aisha forces a smile at the reporter's question, the same one she's heard 100 times. "The first black woman to lead neurosurgery at one of the country's top hospitals. A title she wears with pride, but also weight. It's not just about talent, it's about proving, over and over, that she belongs, that she's earned her place. And despite her achievements, the world still finds ways to remind her of its limits. The patient barely looks at her. "When will the doctor be in?" "I am the doctor," Aisha responds, used to the doubt. It started in medical school, followed by residency, mistaken for a nurse, overlooked on rounds, questioned by those who had less experience but more privilege. She learned early she had to be twice as good, twice as composed, just to stand in the same room. And even then, respect wasn't guaranteed. But she pushed forward, not for validation, but because she refused to be dismissed. Aisha glances at her phone, rereading her keynote speech. Diversity in medicine, equity and opportunity. The irony isn't lost on her. She spent years fighting for change, yet the same prejudices persist. She's heading to one of the most prestigious medical conferences, not just as a speaker but as a symbol, a representation of progress, though her own experience tells a different story. She exhales, steadying herself. This conference is a chance to inspire the next generation. But before she even steps on that stage, another lesson in bias is waiting for her. The airport hums with motion. People rushing past, airline staff barking orders. Travelers move through security, some with ease, others with scrutiny. A silent divide. Aisha notices the small things. Who gets extra smiles, who gets second glances. It's subtle but ever-present, a microcosm of the world beyond these walls. She's focused on her upcoming speech, unaware that her next lesson in bias is only minutes away. Aisha rolls her suitcase toward the gate, mind racing with final thoughts for her presentation. She barely registers the voice over the intercom. "Excuse me, ma'am." She looks up. A uniformed woman stands in her path, eyes unreadable. "There's been a mix-up with your ticket." The words are familiar, too familiar. Aisha stiffens. She's no stranger to barriers, but she hadn't expected to fight one here before even stepping onto the plane. Dr. Aisha Caldwell adjusted the strap of her handbag, stepping toward the boarding gate. The flight attendant, Karen Matthews, barely concealed her reaction, her eyes narrowing for just a second, a fleeting hesitation before pasting on a neutral expression. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Aisha had seen it before. A quick assessment, an unspoken message. The line moved forward. Karen greeted the passenger ahead with ease, her voice light and accommodating. Then, as Aisha approached, the warmth evaporated. "Ticket and ID," Karen said, her tone clipped. No greeting, no acknowledgement, just a demand. Earlier, Aisha had stopped at the counter with a simple request, a seat confirmation. Karen barely looked up from her screen. "Everything is as stated on your ticket," she muttered, moving on to the next passenger without another word. Aisha waited. "I just need to confirm my meal request." Karen exhaled sharply, eyes darting toward her colleague before answering. "You should have done that during booking. Anything else?" The woman behind Aisha stepped forward, visibly annoyed at the delay. Karen's demeanor shifted instantly. "Oh, Mrs. Daniels, right? Yes, I have your preferred seat all set. Enjoy your flight." Aisha bit the inside of her cheek, the contrast unmistakable. Glancing toward the economy line, Aisha saw a young black man, mid-20s, neatly dressed, receiving the same indifferent treatment. "Excuse me, I think my seat is listed incorrectly," he said politely. The agent barely looked at him. "That's what's in the system." "Next." The man hesitated before stepping aside, jaw tight. Aisha's stomach churned. It wasn't outright hostility, just a pattern, dismissiveness, impatience, an expectation that they would simply accept being treated differently. And too often, they did. A middle-aged white man, dressed casually in a blazer and jeans, approached the counter. His voice was light, almost joking. "Hey there, just making sure my upgrade went through." Karen beamed. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore. First class is all set. You'll be among the first to board." Aisha's fingers curled around her ticket. She had the same privilege. She'd paid for it. But here she was, standing in place, waiting for the same validation that had been freely given to him without hesitation. Mr. Whitmore turned, catching her gaze. He offered a polite nod before strolling through without a second glance. No delays, no questions, just an open door. Aisha inhaled deeply, steadying herself. Her grip tightened around her boarding pass, the small slip of paper feeling heavier than it should. She wasn't imagining this. It wasn't paranoia. It was an unspoken hierarchy, a silent rule that dictated who was welcomed and who was merely tolerated. And now she had a choice: walk forward and endure it, or challenge it head-on. Either way, the moment wasn't over. "Ma'am, I need to see your ticket." The voice slices through the air, firm and unyielding. Conversations hush, heads turn. Aisha grips the boarding pass in her hand, pulse quickening. The woman behind the counter, her name tag reads Karen, stares her down, expression unreadable but intent clear. Aisha steps forward. "I just showed it a minute ago." Karen's lips press together. "I need to see it again." Aisha exhales sharply, feeling the weight of a dozen curious stares. She hands over the small slip of paper. Karen barely glances at it before looking back up, skepticism etched into her features. "First class, huh?" she muses, voice carrying across the waiting area. The implication hangs in the air like a bad scent. Aisha straightens. "Is there a problem?" Karen's gaze flickers, challenge evident. "Just making sure everything checks out." Aisha's stomach tightens. She knows exactly where this is going. Karen doesn't hand the ticket back. Instead, she scans Aisha up and down, something cold behind her eyes. "Are you sure you belong in first class?" she asks, voice thick with doubt. The words slap harder than expected. Aisha exhales slowly, willing herself to stay calm. "I paid for my seat like everyone else," she says, keeping her tone even. Karen crosses her arms unbothered. "You'll have to wait here while I verify." Aisha blinks. "Verify what? You just checked my ticket?" Karen shrugs, tone all too casual. "It's standard protocol." Aisha looks past her, spotting a white man being waved through without a second glance. Her jaw tightens. "It didn't seem like protocol when you let him through." Karen's smile is thin, artificial. "You're welcome to take a seat while we sort this out." Aisha's fingers curl into her palm. There is nothing to sort out, except, apparently, her presence. Before Aisha can argue, two uniformed security officers approach. The shift in energy is palpable. Whispers ripple through the waiting area. "Ma'am," one of them says, voice neutral but firm, "we need to verify your ticket." Aisha stiffens. "I just gave it to her, twice." The second officer nods toward Karen. "She's asked us to confirm." Aisha turns to the gate agent, disbelief burning in her chest. "Are you serious? This is harassment." Karen lifts her chin, feigning innocence. "It's just a routine check." A routine check that conveniently only applies to her. Aisha glances at the officers, reading their expressions. No apology, no hesitation, just a procedure. One officer gestures to the side. "Step over here, ma'am." Aisha's pulse pounds in her ears. She's faced bias before, but this is different. This is humiliation, orchestrated with an audience, and she knows exactly how it will look if she refuses. The room is split between those who pretend not to notice and those who can't look away. A man in a suit pulls out his phone, muttering something to the woman next to him. Across the room, a black mother adjusts her child's coat, eyes locking onto Aisha with quiet understanding. Aisha spots a teenager recording on her phone, her lips pressed in frustration. Somewhere, someone murmurs, "Unbelievable." But no one speaks up. The security officers are waiting. The pressure to comply is suffocating. Aisha swallows the lump in her throat. She has fought for her place her entire life, and yet here she is, forced to prove what should never be questioned. And Karen is still watching, her smirk widening. Karen leans against the counter, tapping her nails idly. "Well?" Aisha exhales sharply. There's no winning this fight, not here, not now. She reaches into her bag, pulling out her ID with slow precision. "Here," she says, voice steady but laced with steel. Go ahead, verify it. Karen takes it with exaggerated care, like she expects it to dissolve in her hands. She inspects it longer than necessary before sliding it back. You're all set, she says finally with mock politeness. Aisha doesn't move. I was always all set. Karen gives a half shrug. Have a nice flight. Aisha pockets her ID, shoulders tense. The fight may be over, but the damage is done, and the flight hasn't even begun. Karen's smirk falters as she stares at the ID in her hands. Her fingers tremble slightly. The bold letters spell out, Dr. Aisha Caldwell. The name is impossible to mistake. Silence grips the air. The security officers exchange uncertain glances. Passengers who had been watching shift uneasily. Aisha folds her arms, her voice measured. Do you need further verification, or am I allowed to board now? Karen swallows hard. I was just following protocol. Aisha tilts her head, eyes locked onto Karen's. Protocol? Or prejudice? A murmur ripples through the crowd. The once quiet whispers turn into audible gasps. Karen looks around, realizing too late the depth of her mistake. A sharp voice cuts through the tension. Doctor Caldwell, we've been expecting you. A supervisor rushes over, their tone dripping with urgency. Karen takes a shaky step back, her face draining of color. The supervisor barely glances at her before turning to Aisha. We sincerely apologize for this inconvenience. Please, let me personally escort you to your seat. Karen's throat goes dry. The same security officers who had backed her now hesitate, their authority slipping. Aisha raises an eyebrow. Interesting. It takes my title for you to acknowledge the issue. Passengers exchange knowing looks. Aisha doesn't need to say more. The contrast speaks volumes. Karen stammers, I didn't mean. But the supervisor isn't listening. Their focus is solely on Aisha, treating her with the deference she deserved from the start. Karen's breathing grows shallow. The realization is crushing. She didn't just single out any passenger. She targeted someone with influence. Someone who could fight back. Aisha's gaze never wavers. You humiliated me. Not because of my class status, but because of my skin. Now that you see a title attached to my name, everything changes. Karen's lips part, but nothing comes out. The security officers who had once stood firm now avoid her eyes. Even the passengers who had been passive are now emboldened, their disapproving stares burning into her. Aisha exhales, shaking her head. This is exactly why people record moments like these, because without proof, the world pretends it doesn't happen. Karen feels the weight of every second dragging her down, her earlier confidence shattered. I saw everything. A man in a tailored suit steps forward, his voice sharp and unwavering. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. Karen blinks rapidly, recognizing him. A first-class passenger, a lawyer, the kind of person people listen to. You let others pass through without question, he continues. But she? You treated her differently, and now that you're caught, you scramble for excuses. The tension deepens. More murmurs rise. A few passengers nod in agreement. Others glare at Karen. The lawyer sighs. You see, apologies mean nothing when they only come after exposure. Karen opens her mouth, desperate to respond, but the words tangle in her throat. I was just doing my job, Karen blurts, her voice unsteady. Aisha exhales sharply. Were you? Because it looks a lot like discrimination. Karen fumbles. I didn't mean, but the crowd isn't buying it. The shift in power is undeniable now. The supervisor clears their throat. Dr. Caldwell, shall we? Aisha nods, stepping forward, while Karen stands frozen, drowning in the weight of her choices. Karen's voice is sharp, laced with desperation. This is a misunderstanding. I was just doing my job. Her manager's face is stony. Enough, Karen. We can't overlook this. Passengers watch as she's led away, her protests drowned by murmurs of disapproval. The same authority she once wielded now strips her of control. No more condescending glances, no more unchecked power. The humiliation she imposed has come full circle, but the damage she caused lingers in the air. Aisha's phone vibrates, an official email from the airline's CEO. Dr. Caldwell, I want to personally apologize for the mistreatment you endured. This is unacceptable. We are implementing immediate policy changes to ensure no passengers subjected to such discrimination again. Aisha exhales. Words can't undo what happened, but they can spark change. She replies with one sentence. I'll believe it when I see it. The video has gone viral, millions of views, thousands of comments. This is exactly why we need accountability. Systemic racism at its finest. Good. Let her feel what it's like. News outlets pick up the story. Debates ignite on corporate responsibility. Karen's name trends for all the wrong reasons. The airline scrambles to control the fallout, issuing statements and pledges. Aisha doesn't read the comments. She doesn't need to. The truth is out, and that's enough. Aisha finally settles into her seat. First class, where she always belonged. A movement in the corner of her eye. A young black girl in economy waves, wide-eyed, hopeful. Aisha smiles, nodding ever so slightly. The girl's eyes shine. A silent acknowledgement. A whisper of possibility. Change doesn't always arrive with grand gestures. Sometimes it's in the quiet moments that history begins to shift. Discrimination isn't just a story. It's a reality for many. Have you ever faced or witnessed injustice like Aisha's? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's start a conversation because awareness leads to change. Your experience could empower someone else to stand up for what's right. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We bring you powerful, real-world stories that challenge injustice and inspire action. Join our community as we shine a light on social issues that matter. Your support makes a difference.